Hello, friends, and welcome back for this special edition of our audio excursion, which is part two of my interview with Patti Gallo-Stenman, who has written a book called Diary of a Beatlemaniac. In this second part, we hear more about the stories that made her a Beatlemaniac as a teenage girl in the 60s and how it impacted her life and some of the special friendships she made. So let's listen to part two with Patti. You know, that one of the things that comes up in our discussions in the vinyl community, and there's people of all age groups, of course. A
Sure.
lot of young people are into vinyl these days, as you probably know,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of a resurgence. But you know, there's some people who just don't get it about the Beatles. I mean, maybe musically for them, it's kind of it isn't very advanced, or it isn't hard enough, or
Right.
whatever. But you know, there's the thing about the Beatles is there's really such an emotional tie to the times that, you know, when once you've experienced it, a lot of it really is tied to that.
It's
We
true.
can make a lot of connections in what was going on in our lives and where the Beatles were at in their career. You know,
Uh-huh.
I remember the day I heard the Beatles were breaking up. I mean, just like I do when John Kennedy got assassinated, or you know, I remember that when it hit me. It was like, you're
Right.
kidding me.
That's true.
You know, it was you might as well have said my parents were breaking up or something. It was that kind of shocking and impactful. But I also remember the day Ram came out by Paul McCartney, and I bought that album, and I'm like, oh, the Beatles are kind of back. You know, I just felt like, that,
You're right.
it just felt like, to see that record spinning with the Apple logo and listening to it, I was like, oh boy, this is kind of a taste of the Beatles, and so it's just hard to explain, I guess, is the thing about it. And I know some people might look at some of this and think, "Oh, you guys are crazy," whatever. But
No.
I don't know. This is a set that was sold through a like a magazine, and it's called the
Oh,
Beatles.
wow.
And they did it in different countries. Mine's Japanese. But what I really liked about it the most is all of the songs in here are in
Whoa.
sequential sequence from how they were recorded,
Oh, my goodness.
the order they were
Wow.
recorded in, which is really great because I love to sit down and listen to this and listen to the progression, because it doesn't have any of the UK did it this way and the US did it that way.
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't really, like, as they built their career and built
Yeah.
their matured. And I mean, that's like a 6 or 8 album box, and it's only like
Jeez.
$80 or $90. You can find, it's not that outrageous, really.
Whoa.
And it has some unique mixes as well. So it's just something like that you could sit and really go, yeah, this is how these guys kind of grew,
Hmm.
in their career. So it's just kind of its own genre almost, and
That's true.
as much
That
as
is.
there were other groups, though, Dave Clark Five was they were really great and big. There were Hermits, different groups that kind of came off of that whole British invasion kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
thing, that did that really,
Yeah.
that's where it started. That was what seeded it. But nothing was quite like what they could do in terms of draw and in terms of impact
No,
to what was
exactly.
going on, and that's why, like you said, they have the Beatle Fest. They had in New Jersey, and they're going to have one in Chicago in what, October? Did you say
Yeah.
September?
No, August. August.
August.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think middle of August
And then
every
next
year.
year, yeah, and then next year in February, it's going to be the celebration of since they were in Ed Sullivan and they came to
Yes.
the U.S. So they're going
Yeah.
to have it at the
60.
hotel that used to be the TWA hotel, I guess, right?
Right. Was a
Yeah.
TWA terminal
Terminal.
and at
Sorry, I meant terminal.
JFK Airport, and they turned it about 2 years ago, maybe, into a very modern hotel, like mid-century
That was
kind of hotel.
okay. Yeah.
That's where they're going to have it, which is something interesting. I was actually there for the 50th anniversary, but not at that hotel. They had that in Manhattan, and then they took people out by bus to go to JFK to pay homage to the airport. There's a plaque at JFK Airport which commemorates the Beatles landing there and the date, which
Wow.
is interesting. So,
That
pretty
is.
important stuff, you know.
Yeah, well, it was quite the event. It was definitely quite the event. So let me ask you, the one item you had on your wish list about going to Liverpool
Right.
is because I'm looking to go there as well.
Yeah.
I was in the UK and decided I'd do London first, and I wanted more days to be able to go up to Liverpool because
Right.
I have a good friend that lives up in the Manchester area, and so I've kind of got a little bit of a tour guide person that is
Right. Right.
yeah, that
That's
I
good.
know. So but yeah, I need to find out more about that Beatles week because I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it's since I think it's early September, and it's usually every year. A couple years ago, they were going to do away with the book day or something, Beatle book day, but they reinstated it. So my friends that have written Beatle books have gone there, and they say it's absolutely so much fun. So I've got that on my wish list, my bucket list, maybe to do
Gotcha.
in the next year or two, and that would be a lot of fun. There's other, there's other smaller Beatle celebrations around the country. There's Beatles on the beach somewhere in Florida, and that kind of celebration. And one in Arkansas, which I had actually been to sell books a couple years ago. So there they are. But the fest for Beatle fans is the Biggie and also the Beatle Week in Liverpool.
Hmm.
Those are the big ones. So, which is interesting. But the one thing I wanted to mention while you were talking about, what the Beatles meant, at the ends of the eras and what was happening. I always say that, and my friends, the Beatle babes also agree, and that we became very independent when we were Beatle maniacs back in the mid 60s. We were able to found fan clubs and handle money and send out, glossy pictures and newsletters. And I learned how to take the train to Shea Stadium when I saw them, in 66 from Philly. So what we thought is that the Beatles helped with the independence of women, actually,
Hmm.
because in the beginning of the 70s became women's liberation in the States.
Sure.
And the Beatles were very popular in the mid to late 60s, where all these young teenage girls were coming of age and becoming independent and doing things on their own. And I kind of link both of them together, you know.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Yeah, because guys weren't running those fan clubs for the most part, I'm guessing. So,
No, no, actually, if you're interested, there's a brand new book out by Sarah Schmidt. It was just published a month ago. She's been working on it for several years about Beatle fan clubs.
hmm,
And it's very interesting. I bought a copy of it. Sarah's actually the narrator or commentator for our Beatle Babes group. And her book is just phenomenal about how many fan clubs there were and how these young girls, some of them were as young as 12 and
wow.
13, founded these clubs and made a go out of them, which is interesting. So
Wow.
and there's another good book. I know you're in the record area, but there's another good book called Women in the Beatles, written by, and I was interviewed for it. It was written by a professor, American professor who lives who teaches in Australia. And
Huh.
she wrote about how the women were, what happened to these groups of women who were Beatlemaniacs. How did they grow up? What did they do? How did it influence them? Very interesting. It's like a textbook.
Wow.
So, so we're getting a lot of, we're getting a lot of print.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that only because in the last few weeks I've been listening to a podcast called Women in Vinyl. And these are ladies
Oh,
who actually run record plants and work in that industry. And it's really expanding a lot. And so it's really interesting. And it's a nonprofit to help educate women in this,
yeah,
mastering of records or,
yeah,
the running of plants or printing or whatever it might be. So there's a
Mm,
whole piece in the industry of records that are related to women now as well.
yeah,
So there's a lot
interesting.
of, yeah, and yeah, I didn't realize how many there were. I think I might have told you I interviewed Susan Rogers, who was an engineer
Yeah.
for Prince, and she
Wow.
had a formidable role in his career. And so I'm always crossing these paths with you ladies, it seems. But it's
Yeah.
really interesting evolution that occurred and that opportunity. It's like I always tell the younger kids, you start like if you start working when you're young and you learn the basics,
Hmm.
and I know I started working when I was 15, and we used to have to handle money without a cash register, so you had to know how to make change.
Right, right.
Today, if you give somebody a $20 bill and give them 2 pennies to cover, the 2 cents over 50 cents, they look at you like, why are you giving me 2 pennies? They don't, they
Right.
don't, they're not doing the math on the fly. And
Yeah.
so those things are always really developmental, for young folks to kind of get their bearings and understand the value of work, and invest themselves into something. And something like this, it's fun too, of course. A
Hmm.
fan club. I mean, that's
Oh,
obviously a
yeah.
lot of fun. So where do
Yeah.
the podcasts, where are they held for you, when you guys meet as the Beatle Babes? Where could we find that?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, every podcast that I've done is on my website.
Okay.
You want to check it's Diary of a Beatlemaniac, one word.com. And if you
Diary
go
of,
in there, diaryofabeatlemaniac.com.
okay.
And in there is I think it's under podcast, and the you can just click on that, and I have all my podcasts that I've done, and every one of and you'll see the Beatle Babes down there too, and
Cool.
then all the different Zooms. And I was on television 4 years ago in Good Morning Texas too with my
Okay.
memorabilia. So it's all
I
there.
Yeah, I think I looked at that after I met you. Now it's ringing a bell.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Great.
There's
Diary of a
one
Beatlemaniac.com.
.com.
Yeah.
I wanted to show you one thing before it gets later because I
Sure.
think you guys would be very interested in it.
Sure.
Um, I had a fan club for this gentleman named Victor Spinetti who wrote a book,
Oh yeah.
and actually the actor. And here he was when I saw him at the Beatle Fest the last time in 2007 in Las Vegas. And I interviewed him for the book at the very beginning. I stayed friends with him through his life. And he passed on in 2012. But
Um,
one thing he did, which was really sweet for our fan club, was he decided that when they were going to film um, Help, and they were going by plane from London to New York, the whole cast, to the Bahamas to film Help.
right.
So
Right.
was a menu that was on that plane, the BOAC overseas plane, and Victor wrote in this. This is usually in my safe deposit box, friends.
Ah.
Inside, it says, "For all in Philly, love Victor Spinetti. At present, working on Beatles 2. It wasn't called Help.
Yeah.
Beatles 2. See back page for the autographs of the four lads." And there are their autographs.
Wow.
So two in pencil and two in pen, if you can see up there.
Yeah. Now I can see him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and then this was a menu that what they ate on that airplane going from London, New York, and then down to the Bahamas. They called it the Beatles Bahamas Special. So this actually came to the fan club, and I got it. I was one of the co-presidents, and then my other co-president actually got the sweater that Victor wore in A Hard Day's Night, the fuzzy black.
Oh,
The
wow.
So I don't know what's happened to the sweater, but I have held
Wow.
on to the autographs. Plus,
Wow.
everybody was friends with Victor, including my mother. So when I had a birthday, I think I was 15, and I was going to have a birthday, and Victor was filming in the Alps with the Beatles in Hell. And my mother wrote to Victor. We wrote letters back and forth, and that's those days. And she said, "Patty is turning 15. Can you send something special to her?" Well, First of all, I got a postcard from the Alps, which was in an envelope. And on the back of the postcard, it says, to Patti from Paul McCartney, happy birthday, love.
Oh my gosh.
And then it gets better. If it can get any better, right?
Yeah.
They went to Twickenham Studios later in London to film the interior scenes of Hell. And Victor asked the studio hairdresser to cut, when he cut Paul McCartney's hair, for a lock of Paul McCartney's hair.
Oh my.
And I slept with this under my pillow for 2 years. And I kept saying, is it my color? Are we? Well, my ex-husband had a really funny joke. He said, now she's got his hair, she can clone him.
Right. I was thinking of the DNA thing as soon as you showed that.
Right. Right. So that was kind of funny things that, that we got. We also got other little things from Victor. In fact, very interesting. He was this was his autobiography, up front and personal. He published this, had it published in London. On the back is a picture of John Lennon and Victor in Hell. And the caption is, hey, Vic, this is the back cover, said John, we're really impressed with your fan club. Do you think we can join? Well, guess what? There's a story behind that, because we asked Victor when he was on location with the four Beatles if they could be members of his fan club, and Victor laughed and said, sure. So we sent membership cards to the Victor Spinetti fan club, from the Victor Spinetti fan club, to all four Beatles.
Did they
so
join?
That's what
Yeah. Did they join?
Yeah, they joined. They didn't pay. They did not pay their 50 cents, but they were members. So all these things, actually, I show you, all these things are in my book. I just want to hold the other book up. This is my book. It's called Diary of a Beatlemaniac. And I was very honored last year. I published with an independent publisher in Pennsylvania, and she helped me apply for the Independent Press Award, which is a big deal in the book industry. And I won. I was a winner of the Independent Press Award in the it was the arts and entertainment area, and I have a little star on my book now because
congratulations,
I'm a winner. So
wonderful, well deserved.
Thank you. And the back of the book is actually, well, there's 4 tickets, but there's 3 ticket stubs, because I actually saw the Beatles in person in concert 3 times, and that's not much. Pat Mancuso saw them 4 times. So I saw them in Philly in 64 in September. I saw them in Philly in 66 in August. And I saw them in Shea Stadium, but that was the 66 August concert. Mm-hmm. So I did see them 3 times in concert. So I'm a relic of another age.
Was it as loud as everybody says it was in terms of craziness?
No, well, I'll tell you the truth, and this is what I always tell everybody. The first concert was at a convention hall with a closed, convention center. And you couldn't hear them in 64 in September. You couldn't see them. It was dark, and the acoustics were horrendous. And they had the floor level was all folding chairs, because it was a convention center. So they had basketball there, they had other things. So the girls were so crazy, including me. We all stood on those folding wooden chairs, and they fell over. So kids were being hurt because they're wobbly. Okay. And you couldn't hear anything, and you couldn't see anything. So I was pretty upset when I left there that night, because I said, gee, I didn't really hear much or see anything. But then they went into doing the stadium tours. And the stadium tours that what I was at in 66 were big football and baseball stadiums,
Right.
you could actually see them. They look like ants, you could see them all the way down there, and you could hear them because these big stadiums have loudspeakers. So, it was kind of cheesy, but you could hear it. But it was a lot different than the first time when it was in
Sure.
a closed convention hall. So I can say it was a difference. And Shea Stadium 66 was pretty interesting. The humidity was horrible that night, but and it wasn't sold out because John had just made his statement about being bigger than Jesus. So
Mm.
the top of the whole stadium was empty, the very top.
Mm. I see. Well, that's 3 more times than most of us have seen them. So,
Yeah. I was fortunate, because I've lived during that. I was young. I was old enough. You were still too young, but I was old enough to take a train from Philadelphia at age 15 or 16 and go to Shea Stadium. In those days, it was safe,
yeah, I understand. Yeah, different world.
Oh, yeah.
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 But one of my daughters, who really loves the Beatles and loves music of that era, says, "Yeah, that was the time to be, growing up, musically. That was such a
Oh,
great
yeah.
time." And I
Amazing.
agree.
It was amazing time to grow up with music and the crazy culture. You have Woodstock around that time. There was just, some Bob Dylan, and I just like amazing, input of fantastic talent back then. And I don't think I really, when it comes to rock and stuff, I don't think we're going to see that again. It was just an
Mm.
amazing time. And actually, one funny point too is that speaking about this, rock era, uh, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had contacted me and some of my other friends who've done fan memoirs because they were very interested in putting fan memoirs in their library and archives at the Rock
Mhm.
and Roll Hall of Fame. So my book is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is
Wow, that's great.
it's kind of interesting,
Yeah,
because that was such a time to be a fan, to be a Beatlemaniac. So that's
yeah,
true.
yeah. Nothing close to it, really. And
Mm-mm.
did you? So the old back then the old thing was Beatles versus the Rolling Stones. Were there any friends in Rolling Stone groups that you knew?
Uh, no, actually, I
Clubs?
didn't have any friends that were crazy about the Stones, to tell the
Okay.
truth, but I did actually have, what do I have here? I actually do have, I brought that out too. I have some Rolling Stone albums.
Ah,
These are originals too from the 60s.
oh,
And
nice.
I just brought a couple of, I have three.
Oh, that's
I
a
love
beauty.
this one.
That's a great
Yeah,
cover.
yeah, it's a
One of the
great
best
cover.
covers ever. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing cover. And then I had the third one. I had the flowers.
Mm.
So I did collect different albums from. Yeah, I was just in love with Chad and Jeremy, by the way.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Chad and Jeremy used to play a lot at the Fest for Beatle fans. And then Chad died a few years ago. But Jeremy still comes to the fest, and he didn't do the fest this April, but he did the Flower Power tour, which is another incredible thing. If you have a little extra money and you like cruising, every late March there is a week where there's like Mickey Dolenz and there's all kinds of people. Herman from Herman's Hermits. They all come to the Flower Power cruise, and
Wow.
Peter Asher is he's the MC on the
Wow.
cruise. And it goes out. If you just Google Flower Power cruise, it's very popular and it's very expensive because it's a week's cruise in the Caribbean,
Mm.
and it's every year in late March. But you'll find Jeremy was there this year, but he didn't do the Fest for Beatle fans.
Mm.
And Peter Asher did both. So
Okay.
he was an incredible entertainer, and
Yeah. And that guy that I did the walk tour, I think it's Richard Porter's the guy's name.
That's right, Rich. I
And
was thinking,
Richard Porter. And
yeah,
we stood and walked. We're outside of Peter and Jane Asher's house where they grew up, and they were
yeah,
showing the back bedroom where Paul used to have to escape out of to be able to not
right.
be seen. I went
Gosh,
through an
yeah.
alleyway, but my wife saw Peter Noon here about 6 months ago, 8 months ago,
Yeah.
here locally in Texas. She said, very entertaining, very
Yeah.
entertaining.
Yeah. During COVID, he actually had a show a couple times a week, which he would broadcast from his home, and he'd do some songs and he'd talk, and it was very, very entertaining. Neil
Well,
Sedaka is still doing one
yeah.
from home,
Well,
which
Peter
is
Noon
really,
was on Sirius XM 60s on 6 channel.
yes,
Is what
yes.
Peter was doing, because I used to hear him a lot on the 60s on 6. So,
And Peter Asher has his weekly show on Sirius Radio,
oh,
and he
really?
did a book that was based on his show. And he is actually good friends with my one friend Pat Mancuso for 35 years. They've been friends. So I hear a lot of what Peter's doing, and he's doing. He does tours and stuff, and these guys are all hitting 80 years old.
I know.
Some of them are 80 years old. It's not easy to get
Yeah.
around.
Is he on the Beatles Sirius channel? Yep.
Yes,
Okay,
he
that's right.
is.
I thought I've heard
He
him.
does
Yeah.
a really good show, and he's very well respected. Yeah, Peter, and he does an incredible evening show. He does a personal show about his life, which is he does it Beatle Fest, and he does it on the road in different cities, which is good. And then of course, Gordon died some years ago, so he's
Mm,
on his own. So sometimes Peter gets together with Jeremy and they
yeah.
sing together.
Kind of. Yeah.
It's really cool because they both have beautiful voices. So it really is nice. And I've seen them several times do a show together at the Fest for Beatle fans. So it's kind of well worth it if you see it advertised. I keep asking, keep asking if Peter's going to come down this way,
Mm,
because, but a lot of times he's on the West Coast and the East Coast.
sure.
So
Sure.
and they're not here. But it's interesting that they're still around, they're still entertaining, which
Yeah.
is cool. Just like
Pete.
Paul.
Yeah. Peter and Gordon had a song. It wasn't a big hit. It was a top 40, but wasn't top 10. And it was called Knight in Rusty Armor. And it was
Yeah,
one of the funniest songs. The premise
yeah,
of the song about
yeah,
this couple that was a knight that was in rusty armor. And,
yeah.
just things that they wrote then that were just, you never hear anything like that these days, but it just was one of those makes you think kind of songs, right?
It's just so funny because well one of their funny hits just like that was Lady Godiva,
Oh,
if you
absolutely.
remember.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And my friend Pat, she started a group years and years ago because she follows them around a lot in those days when they were together before he died. Yeah, Gordon. They were called the Godiva Girls, and they had T-shirts and the whole 9 yards, and they clapped when Peter and Gordon came out and sing the choruses and stuff. So there's a whole little, sort of subculture around a lot of these 60s people that are still, entertaining today, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the story of Dave Clark he owned all the rights to their music. So like
Wow.
most bands, they made money. They actually made money. He was one of the few success. I mean, even the Beatles themselves got kind of screwed for a while,
Yeah.
but he did that like from the jump. And it was like, yeah. So it's interesting that, these guys have different kind of backgrounds and different kind of stories to tell. And
Sure.
yeah, but I liked Dave Clark 5 was one of my favorite British bands as well. I really, I got a greatest hits of theirs when I was in the UK. Really, I've been looking for one that sounded really good, and I finally found one that really kind of is kind of has that 60s sound to it, has that little bit raw AM radio kind of sound to it.
They They were a good group.
Yeah.
I actually saw them in person at a press conference in Philadelphia.
Ah,
Because I had this part of the reason I could write this book was because I was a journalist for many years afterwards, but I had this little column in a local Philadelphia weekly paper from the time I was 14 and a half. And it's a long story how I got it. And it was free. I mean, I didn't get paid for writing this teenage column every week or every 2 weeks. But I wrote about music and fashion and all kinds of stuff and the teenagers. But the Dave Clark Five were coming to Philly, and it was in I guess it was 65. And I was able to get 2 press passes for their press conference. And I can remember going into that press conference with, I think, a girlfriend of mine, probably my friend Diane. And somebody asked me, because I was so young, to get out of the first row of the press conference. And I just gave them dirty looks. And I said, I'm a journalist and I am sitting here. And I didn't move. So I got some really good pictures. I still have them taken with my Instamatic camera of the Dave Clark Five at this press conference in Philly before the concert. So it was kind of fun. It was a fun time, you know.
Oh yeah, man. You were there. That's just amazing. That's
yeah.
So your book is a great, easy read. Hold it back up, because I encourage anybody who has an interest in this region of time to take a step back in memory lane. I found it very, very enticing to read and easy to it was hard to put down, just kind of like, oh, this story, that story, the other. It really brought back a lot of recollections, and memories. So, but you were up there close and personal, and that's why we wanted to talk to you today.
Thank you. I was just going to say, if anybody wants to check it out, you could get it on Amazon.com or Diary of a Beatlemaniac, or you could order it from me. I could autograph it, but again, it's diaryofbeatlemaniac.com, or also from my my publisher in Pennsylvania, Cynren Press, Cynren. They have copies too. So I'd be happy if anybody's interested. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So if they order it off your website, you can sign it. That's great.
Yes. Yeah, I can sign it.
Yeah, get a signed one. I did.
It's always nice to sign them for people.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I got one for my daughter and gave it to her as well. She enjoying it as well. So that was great.
Good. It is the thing about this book in it, which is so much fun. Of course, I kept a diary from the time I was 13, which a lot of girls did back then. And then it went right into Beatlemania in the diary. And then I also had scrapbooks. A lot of girls were into scrapbooking. So I used my columns that I wrote, my scrapbooks, and my diary. So it's a real girls' book too, of the times of how we grew up. And it's like 50, 60 years ago now. So it's like, okay, it's a long time,
No, but we got to capture that. I mean, that's the thing about it. If you don't capture it, then it's gone, right? So it gives people that perspective, and not only our kids, but also other people. Just like doing YouTube, right? It's the same kind of thing, and that's one of the reasons I started. Was I said, I've got this background in history, and I was a disc jockey, and it's like I've got to share this somehow. So
good idea.
Yeah,
good idea.
So that's great. Well, Patti, I thank you very much for you taking the time. You've been more than generous with it.
Thank you.
And I wish you much success in your book, and also have fun. We got to have fun while we can.
Oh, we sure do. And music is a great way to have fun. It's amazing.
And it brings people together. And that's one thing that's great about music, is it gets beyond all the tragedy of the day and all the politics of the day, and kind of can bring people together. And I think that's what we need, because otherwise we get caught up in a way that we just don't really spend as much time together. And sharing music is a way to spend time together. So it's a great vehicle. So thanks so much for taking the time.
welcome.
Take
Thank you for
care.
inviting
Stay
me.
well.
And have a happy springtime, everybody. Take
Uh,
care. Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Take care.
Bye now. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
So there you have it, Patti Gallo-Stenman and her book, Diary of a Beatlemaniac. Pick it up. It's an easy read. Get it on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Again, it's something that really kind of opens up this understanding of what was going on at the time. And again, beyond the Beatles' own music and persona, in this country, in the United States, we had the benefit of their changing the subject, so to speak, after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And of course, that has a real positive recollection for us that lived during that time. But again, their music lives on. 50, 60 years later, we see anniversary editions of their records coming out and special mixes and multi-channel and mono and just every slice and dice you can think of, because it still garners that kind of interest. Pretty unique in history, as it were. So if you like the content today, I'd appreciate you subscribing by clicking on the bell below. The top one for all gets you notifications. A thumbs up or like is appreciated, as are any comments. Did you live during that time? What are your recollections? Any special stories? Any questions? Patti lives around this area. I'm sure I'll be staying in touch with her and seeing her at events because we share that common bond of loving the Beatles. So for now, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time on our Safe and Sound Texas audio excursion. Take care, everybody.